All right, so let's take a deep dive into this story of Ananias and Sapphira.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at excerpts from some academic texts
Okay.
that analyze the New Testament,
Right.
specifically the book of Acts.
Yeah.
You might already know this story,
Uh-huh.
or maybe it's brand new to you.
Right.
Either way,
Okay.
it gives us a really fascinating look at the early Christian church in Jerusalem.
Yeah, what's really interesting is this community was known for this radical sharing.
Oh, wow.
Almost like a proto-socialist experiment, you know?
Yeah, our sources describe believers selling off their possessions and giving the proceeds to anyone in need.
Exactly.
There's this real sense of unity and purpose in Acts chapter 4.
Right.
Like everyone is all in on this new way of life.
Yeah, totally committed.
But then we meet Ananias and Sapphira.
Yeah, this couple also sells a property,
Okay.
but decides to keep back some of the money for themselves.
While still trying to present themselves as totally generous
Yeah.
to the apostles. Almost like wanting the credit for giving without the actual sacrifice.
Exactly, and that's where things get really interesting.
Oh, really?
They offer a portion of the money,
Yuck.
claiming it's the full amount.
So they're lying.
It seems like kind of a small deception, right?
Right.
But remember, this community is built on radical honesty.
Oh, wow. So what happens next? Does their plan work?
No, not at all.
Oh.
Peter, one of the apostles,
Okay.
is said to have been given this insight by the Holy Spirit,
Uh-huh.
and he confronts Ananias directly.
Wow.
Imagine the tension in that room.
I bet. So they get called out right there on the spot.
Yeah, they do.
What was the reaction?
So the text describes Ananias being struck dead instantly.
Right.
This wasn't like a lighthearted matter.
Yeah.
Lying wasn't just about breaking a rule.
Yeah.
It was seen as this really deep betrayal of trust
Uh-huh.
and a direct offense against God.
It's interesting how the sources frame this as a lie against the Holy Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
not just against the community.
Mm. Right. The implication is that their deceit runs deeper than just trying to impress others. It's about the state of their hearts and their relationship with a higher power.
I can see how that would send shockwaves through the entire community.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What about Sapphira? Does she know what happened to her husband?
So a few hours later, Sapphira arrives totally unaware of the drama that just unfolded.
Oh, no.
She's asked about the sale price,
Okay.
and she doubles down,
Oh, wow.
confirming the lie her husband told.
Oh, wow. Talk about walking into a tense situation completely blind. What happens to her?
She suffers the same fate as Ananias.
Oh, my goodness.
The text is pretty clear that this isn't about simple punishment.
Okay.
It's about the community reckoning with a threat to its core values
Mm-hmm.
and the power of the Holy Spirit to expose deception.
And this definitely wasn't something they could just sweep under the rug, right?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Acts chapter 5 says that fear spread through the whole church because of these events. This story became a defining moment in the early church's history,
Yeah.
shaping their understanding of honesty and commitment.
So just from this first part of the story, we're already seeing these themes of hypocrisy
Mm-hmm.
and accountability
Yeah,
and the high stakes of truthfulness in this community.
absolutely. You know what strikes me is this story isn't just about a historical event.
Right.
It raises these, timeless questions about the motivations behind our actions. You know,
Yeah.
Ananias and Sapphira wanted to appear generous,
Uh-huh.
but weren't willing to make the sacrifice.
So it's not just about the lie itself,
Right.
but about what that lie reveals about their character.
Exactly.
They wanted the social standing that came with generosity,
Mm-hmm.
but without the cost.
Exactly. Our sources point out that their deception wasn't just about the money.
Okay.
It reflects this deeper disconnect between their outward actions
Uh-huh.
and their inward beliefs.
Right.
It makes you wonder, what were they hoping to achieve?
That's a good question. Do you think they believed they could somehow fool God?
Well,
Or were they more focused on how other people perceive them?
it's hard to say for sure,
Yeah.
but their actions kind of suggest they prioritized appearances over true integrity.
Yeah.
Perhaps they underestimated how seriously this community took honesty,
Right.
or maybe they thought they could justify their actions somehow.
It reminds me of how we sometimes grapple with similar dilemmas in our own lives.
Hmm.
You know,
Oh, yeah.
that pressure to look good,
Right.
to be seen as successful or generous,
Mhm.
even if it means bending the truth a little.
That's a great point. The story of Ananias and Sapphira, while extreme,
Yeah.
provides a lens for examining our own tendencies towards hypocrisy.
Right.
Those small compromises we make, those moments where we prioritize image over substance.
It's almost like they were trying to have it both ways.
Yeah,
The recognition without the sacrifice,
right.
but ultimately their dishonesty caught up with them.
And the consequences were severe. This story underscores the idea that actions have consequences,
Mm.
not just for
Right.
ourselves, but for the community as a whole.
It makes you think about the ripple effects of our choices,
Yeah.
even seemingly small ones.
Huh.
If dishonesty had taken root in this community,
Right.
it could have eroded the trust that held them together.
Absolutely. Remember, this was a time of intense persecution for early Christians.
Right.
Unity and trust were essential for their survival.
Uh-huh.
Ananias and Sapphira's actions threatened to undermine those very foundations.
Their lie wasn't just a personal failing.
Right.
It was a betrayal of the community they belonged to,
Yeah.
and the community responded decisively to protect itself.
Which brings us to another important theme.
Okay.
Accountability.
Yeah.
Peter confronts Ananias and Sapphira directly.
Right.
He doesn't shy away from the truth,
Yeah.
even though it's uncomfortable.
He could have ignored it or tried to downplay it,
Right.
but instead he chooses transparency and honesty, even though it leads to a dramatic outcome.
Yes. And this highlights the importance of accountability within a community.
Okay.
Calling out wrongdoing, even when it's difficult, is essential for maintaining trust and integrity.
So it seems like this story isn't just a historical anecdote.
Right.
It's a cautionary tale that speaks to the human tendency towards hypocrisy and the importance of aligning our actions with our values.
And it's a reminder that our choices have consequences not just for ourselves, but for the communities we're a part of.
Right.
Even small acts of dishonesty can erode trust
Uh-huh.
and undermine collective well-being.
You know, it feels like we've been focusing a lot on the negative aspects of this story, like the lie, the hypocrisy, the consequences.
Right.
But our sources also emphasize this importance of genuine generosity.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that fit into all of this?
That's a good point. The story of Ananias and Sapphira serves as kind of a contrast
Okay.
to the authentic generosity we see elsewhere in the early church.
Right.
Remember that description in Acts chapter 4 of people willingly sharing everything they had?
Yeah, it's described as this beautiful outpouring of love and selflessness,
Right.
a true embodiment of their faith.
Exactly. And that's the kind of generosity the story of Ananias and Sapphira implicitly critiques.
Okay.
True generosity isn't about impressing others or seeking recognition.
Uh-huh.
It's about a genuine desire to share what we have motivated by love and compassion.
So it's not about the amount you give, but the heart behind it.
Precisely.
Mm.
In Acts 5.4, Peter says to Ananias, "Didn't it belong to you before it was sold? And after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal?"
Wow.
What's important is the free choice they had. They
Mhm.
could have given freely, or they could have chosen not to give at all.
Right.
There was no compulsion.
It's the attempt to deceive,
Yeah.
to manipulate the situation for their own benefit that
Mhm.
makes their actions so problematic.
Absolutely.
Like they were trying to game the system rather than acting from a place of sincerity.
Right. And their story kind of invites us to examine our own motivations. When it comes to giving,
Uh-huh.
are we giving out of a genuine desire to help others?
Right.
Or are we seeking something in return, like praise or recognition?
It's a tough question, but an important one to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
We all want to be seen as good and generous people,
Right.
but that desire can sometimes lead us astray if we're not careful.
It reminds me of that saying.
Yeah.
It's not about the size of the gift, but the size of the heart behind it.
I like that.
This story highlights the importance of aligning our actions with our values.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the story of Ananias and Sapphira,
Okay.
what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think the story really challenges us to be honest with ourselves and with others,
Right.
to examine our motivations and make sure our actions are aligned with our values.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in appearances,
Yeah.
but true integrity shines through when our inner lives match our outward behavior.
It's also a reminder that we're all part of a larger community, and our actions have consequences that extend beyond ourselves.
Absolutely.
Even small acts of dishonesty can erode trust and damage relationships.
And lastly, I think this story reminds us of the importance of grace and forgiveness.
Right.
Ananias and Sapphira made a terrible mistake,
Yeah.
but their story doesn't have to define them.
Right.
We all make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
and we can all find redemption through forgiveness and a commitment to living more authentically.
That's really good. It's been quite a journey unpacking this story.
Yeah.
We've explored themes of hypocrisy, accountability, the complexities of generosity, and the enduring power of truthfulness.
Mm-hmm.
What a fascinating deep dive.
Indeed. And I'd leave our listener with this final thought. What are the small acts of dishonesty we might be overlooking in our own lives?
Oh, that's good.
And what steps can we take to live with more integrity and authenticity?
That's a powerful question to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking truth.